Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome you to the 5th meeting in 2014 of the Infrastructure and Capital Investment Committee. Can I remind everybody to switch off their mobile devices as they do affect the broadcasting system. Perhaps you'll see some members consulting tablets. That's because they use get their papers in digital format. So the first item on the agenda today is the Housing Scotland Bill, and we're going to hear evidence from two panels of representatives on the provisions in the Housing Scotland Bill which relate to mobile home issues. On the first panel, we have representatives from mobile and park home residents representative groups. So can I welcome Brian Doig, who's President of the National Association of Park Home Residents, Barry Plews, Chair of the Park Home Legislation Action Group, and David Tweedle, Senior Consultant Membership Secretary of the Independent Park Home Advisory Service. So, Adam, would you like to start off the question this morning, please?
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, gentlemen. The Scottish Government has a vision for housing that, and I'll quote, that all people in Scotland live in high-quality, sustainable homes that they can afford and that meet their needs. To what extent do you think that this bill's provisions support that vision?
If I may, sir, I think the bill supports the vision with regard to the extra security for the people that are going to be living there. Because one of the main problems that has occurred over the years is the security of the tenure of the persons that live there, and also the unscrupulous type of person that owns the land and leases it to the people to have their homes on. And as you're probably aware, they purchased a home, but they don't own the land. And consequently, a lot of these unscrupulous people do treat some of the people badly and doesn't give them the security. They give all sorts of rules and regulations that suit them that doesn't apply to any legislation. But now, because you have brought in on here, one of the biggest, most important things that we've looked at for many years is the fit and proper person, which you've brought in under this Act. And it does cover quite a big area of what's right for the fit and proper person. In other words, what criteria he has to meet to be a fit and proper person.
Specifically later on, if you just...
Okay, and that's fine, but yeah. That's basically, I would say, where we fit the criteria that the security of everything is basically the important factor. It is a cheaper way of living, apart from the fact that it does get involved, obviously, with the cost of renting the land. That goes up every year, and it gets a dearer cost to the people. So they buy a cheaper house, but the expenditure for staying there can be more expensive.
Anyone else care to?
We do find, our organisation, the Independent Park Home Advisory Service, we do find that the members are increasing in Scotland, which means it's becoming a more affordable way of living. It's becoming more popular in Scotland. Nowhere near England yet, but it is catching on, and we anticipate that this type of living will be more prevalent in Scotland in the coming years. And of course, what we're here for and what you were doing is making it secure for the people that choose that way of living. And you know, the work that we've done at the moment is okay, and we've got the new implied terms, which was a better agreement for the residents. Their agreement between the park owner and the residents, the new implied terms, and then now we're discussing site licensing, which is a very, very important part, because we've found in England that local authorities just don't enforce things, and it is a massive problem. So when we come to enforcement and discuss enforcement, you know, it's an important part, because we find that local authorities sometimes never visit the parks that they're responsible for and don't know anything about it. People change jobs within the local authority, and they don't know what their responsibilities are, and nobody, you know, it's very, very poor.
We'll go into enforcement in more detail later.
Mr. Plews?
I think I'm probably unique in this room, is that I'm the only person who actually lives in a park home in Scotland. And I've been there now for the last 6 or 7 years. And strangely enough, on the park I live, many of the issues that we have here being addressed don't exist. And I got involved because I started to visit other parks to see what sort of things were happening, basically to see if we were missing out on anything. And I found that lots of these problems really do exist in Scotland and exist in a very bad way. And I've had some really shocking situations with residents, elderly residents on parks throughout Scotland. Many of them contact us looking for advice, many of them really at the last tether. And if my colleague and I, who unfortunately can't be here, Mike Larkman, who is suffering from bad health himself, if he and I, 6, 7 years ago, had thought we were going to have a Scottish bill like this, we'd have been very happy people. We started off with help from Angela Constance, who happens to be Mike's MSP, who managed it after a while to get us an interview with the housing minister at the time, Keith Brown, I think. And that's where all of this started. And Mike and I have been with it, with our other colleagues, for that length of time now. And it's been a struggle, but if this is the sort of bill we're going to put in place in Scotland, then we will be well satisfied.
Thank you very much for that.
Just add one thing. You know, we get constantly told that some of the English problems aren't prevalent in Scotland and all that. Well, one of the worst park owners in England, who operates 36 parks, is already in Scotland. So it is a problem, and it will come up here. You know, some of the rogues and the unscrupulous park owners who are in England, and there are many, and they will come up here if they can get in. So it is a problem for Scotland, just the same as England. They're already up here.
Thanks very much. Just one more question from me was with regards to the consultation process for this bill. Are you happy with the way this bill has been consulted upon? Are you happy with your input to it?
Yeah, yes, I think we are. I mean, I can recall that I first came to this building in 2005 when all of this took off and started with consultation and evidence sessions in this very building, and that was in 2005. It took a long time to get where we are today, but I think the consultation generally has been very good. Nothing's been left out. We've been, you know, given all the information that we've been able to ask for or be sent out automatically from the government officials, and I think it's very good, actually. Yeah. No problem with it at all.
I can echo that.
Yes, if I could just add, the young people who have been taking us through this process have been extraordinarily helpful, extraordinarily clever in what they've been doing for us. Certainly, we're all elderly people, and we tend to get a little bit anxious about things and a little bit annoyed at times, but they've carefully taken us through every step of the process, and I could give them nothing but praise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we go on to look at licensing in particular, can I just ask you to give us a kind of oversight of, you know, how many parks are there in Scotland? Do you know how many people live in mobile home parks?
Yeah,
We're looking at about a couple of hundred
parks.
Well, we've actually got about 450 parks in Scotland, I think. Yeah. And there's probably now around about 4,500 to 5,000 people who actually live in parks. That may have changed. I did a survey some years ago, and certainly that will have changed. But those sort of numbers will be about right. But they are increasing.
Is this all over Scotland, or are there concentrations in particular areas? Or?
They're basically all over Scotland. What's tended to happen is that holiday parks have suddenly realised, the owners have suddenly realised that this is obviously a better way of making money and a more secure way of making money. to have it as a residential park rather than a holiday park. So these are all over the country, really.
Some of them are quite. There are some that are smallish parks, you know, with sort of 5 and 6 homes on, or even less in some cases. But yes, I mean, I think our last survey, what we done, we found that over 300 that we found, because we've got to search for them, because if we haven't got membership or anything on these parks, then we don't know where they are. The same as the councils have got the same problem. But Barry's gone on since then and come up with a 400, which is about right, I think.
Okay, so you know, the Scottish Government says that there are evidence that, and I think you've backed that up, that there are unscrupulous site owners who exploit vulnerable residents and fail to comply with their statutory obligations as they currently are. How widespread is that, would you say?
It's quite widespread.
Not so much in Scotland yet, but it will do, because, as I've said, they've one of the worst park owners in England is now up here, operating 36 parks. Not in Scotland, that's his total stock. And in England, it was fairly widespread that you know, unscrupulous park owners just don't obey the law. Really, you know, the laws are there to stop them doing these things, but like everything, lawbreakers break laws, don't they? They just do it. They don't care. And it's a certain type of person, certain type of communities that run these parks, and it's really awful for vulnerable people who've sunk their life savings into these homes, and they're not cheap. They're expensive homes in the south of England. You pay £250,000 for these homes. You're buying into a way of life, and suddenly you find that the guy in the office is an absolute tyrant and rides roughshod over you, and that's your life destroyed. So it's, you know, it is important for organisations like ourselves to keep on top of it, and that's what we do. Brian and I are 2 different organisations, but we work together, and we pursue people's problems for them in these parks. We have expertise in site licensing, the mobile home legislation, and that's our area of expertise. We've been doing it many years.
So of the 450 parks in Scotland, would there be 450 owners, or do some own quite a number of parks?
Number of owners who own a multiple of parks, yeah.
How many would they?
I have no idea. I have no idea either.
Okay, we can ask the second panel that. So, would you say that the majority kind of regulate themselves pretty well through associations such as the BH and HPA, or not?
I think there is quite a few there. I think the BA and HPA membership is not as strong as what it could be, but there are quite a lot that do regulate through there. I think there's more park owners in Scotland that do not belong to an organisation because of the way they are and the way they want to be. They're in a fraternity that is unscrupulous, if you like we've already said. From my experience, and I've been doing this now for 26 years, helping people wherever it's possible because of this type of rogue that we have in Wales, Scotland, England. They've all been around. England's been the worst. But I would say that there's quite a number in Scotland, and what you have to understand is that we don't know of all of them. We only know of them, of the persons that come to us with problems. That's the way we find out. It's, you know, it travels through the system, as it were. And I believe there's quite a few more people out there, unscrupulous, that we don't know about until something seriously happens. And we've got evidence of very serious cases over the years where people have been basically put out of their houses.
There's obviously a natural tendency of elderly people to keep their heads down.
That's right.
And that's one of the biggest problems we have, is getting people to come out and tell us what's going wrong. I've found the only way I can do that is I've travelled around parks and met people. And there are parks, I repeat again, I live on a park where none of these problems exist. But there are parks where these problems don't exist. There are other parks where some of the things that happen are seriously criminal. And I have tried just recently to involve the police in a particular case. And sadly, the couple that were involved, both suffering from cancer, have decided that they can't take any more. They don't want any more hassle, no more problems. And they now have decamped to a flat nearby. And the owners have actually taken the home from them, made them sign away their home, probably worth, what, 120,000. And that's the sort of criminality that exists, and it does exist in Scotland, and there are a number of people who practice those sort of things. Unfortunately, this couple decided that they couldn't take any more and they would not make a formal complaint. But the police were absolutely certain that they had a case. And it's that sort of thing that I've met as I've wandered around. And
it comes back to the fear tactic. They put fear into people, these crooked people, they really do. And as we've said, the people are frightened. We can have as many laws as we like, and we're pleased with what you're doing, we really are. There's a lot there. But until you get in a position where you can use this law, it's worthless from that point of view. And unfortunately, because of the nature of how these people deal with the elderly, and if you think of an elderly person, probably had some bricks and mortar to live in, and they've realised that their pension's not much good, or they're not going to have anything. So if we sell the house and buy a mobile home, we might have 50,000 change to help us go through life. So consequently, when the pressure goes onto them by these unscrupulous people, they get so frightened because they're threatened with eviction and all sorts of things by these people. They tell them, you know, I'm the boss, this is my land, if I say you go, you go. And it frightens them to death. The people in their late 70s, 80s, etc., that get this fear put in them, they look to try and go somewhere, and they can't sell their home because Mr. Park owner stops them in some way or another, whichever way he wants, and the poor souls end up probably selling it back to him for about £5,000 and off you go, or even less. We've had them in England where they've sold their home for £1. And once you've taken that £1, it's legal. And that's the way they work. So, yeah, there is quite a bit of it going on all over the UK, really, and it's spreading.
The fit and proper person test may address some of the problems, because one of the problems is that just the criminal element. If they weren't behaving criminally on mobile home parks, they would be behaving criminally somewhere else. They are criminals, and they earn their living by being criminals. So they've decided that they don't need masks and guns. They can come and strip somebody of 100 grand just by a bit of bullion. And it's very, very lucrative. And those are the type of people that we have in the mostly in the south of England. Right. Yeah. And you know, you will get, as I say, one of them is already in Scotland. One of them.
Because they're emigrating already. Yes,
that's right. That's right.
It's but they are criminals.
So.
Person test may address that.
Yeah,
we'll get around it probably, but there you are.
We'll come on to that in a minute. So, I mean, that you've obviously addressed one problem of elderly people being put in fear. What other problems are there currently that the current legislation perhaps doesn't work? You know, you mentioned, for example, that some local authorities haven't a clue what they should be doing in terms of mobile parks, but what other kind of particular problems, like the one you've already said about the elderly people being put into fear?
There is through licensing, there is one in particular where over the years the site licence conditions which councils or local authorities put onto the licence, which becomes a legal requirement, but once they put that on there, it should be abided by, but it's never policed because the acts have never allowed it to be policed. And so, you know, the councils haven't had a duty to do this. As an example, the spacing distance between homes is 6 metres as a minimum, which is laid down in all the legislation. Local authorities, and I'm not just talking about in Scotland, all over the place, the local authority officers are sort of younger coming through the ranks, and they start working on the model standards which are issued by the Secretary of States, etc., which are guidelines to the council to fulfil the licence requirements. These model standards are written at various times by the Secretary of State. There's one in England that came out in 2008. The one before that was 1989. Now, that document states that these 6 metres shall apply. The council officials are going to parks where some of these 6 metres is not there. It's 5.5 metres or 5 metres or whatever, because it was never policed in the first place. Now, the first employed terms were brought into being in 1961. When the 1960 Caravan Site Control Development Act came out, this was in the next year, they made the model standards because that document said that they could. And then it was 20 feet the distance in the old language of measurement, which is now 6 metres, which is only that much difference. Now, if that was policed in 1960, a majority of these problems would not be there, in the spacing distances in particular, because the council's never policed it. So the road park owner has just gone along and put homes on where he's wished. He hasn't worried about the 6 metres. Consequently, over the years, and it's happening now, where people have been living in their home for 10, 20 years, but the spacing distance has been wrong. The new officials are going around and saying, well, that's got to be altered. It's a fire risk under the new fire regulations. It should be 6 metres and it's only 5. There's no room on the park to move these homes around, so someone's got to go. So Mr. Park owner, who is the licence holder rather, he has to abide by what the council say, because his licence is issued by the council to him to run his business. That home is in breach of that licence by the spacing distance, and it's owned by the old couple that live there. So the park owner then tells them people, your home is in breach. You've got to move out, etc. Albeit that it's his problem, the people are not allowed to site the homes. They don't know anything about these distances or anything like that. But Mr. Park owner does. So this is happening, and it's happening today. And we've got a lot of it in England, and I know you must. It's also happened up here because we've had phone calls about it, where people are threatened that they could lose their home. This is why we've always said that the model standards, which are guideline to the councils, as I've said, are made to be flexible. We've required in England that the councils not write the licence conditions, but look at the park and look at the reality of it and if it's going to cause grief. It's going to cause people losing their homes. Let's look at it sensibly. When its home's life finishes, then it's the time to do something about it, or when the people pass away, or whatever. But that is the type of problem that does go on. And it creates major problems for another fear into the people.
In my experience, not all the homes on the site are owned. Some are rented by the owner. Do we know what kind of the split is? Mr. Hughes, do you have any idea how many
I think
are rented?
in terms of most residential parks, all the homes are owned by the residents. There are many places where you can go and rent properties, but certainly all the parks I've visited, they're owner-owned.
There are quite a lot.
There are a lot of places where you can go and rent a home on a park, many places. But on the residential parks generally, I mean, the thing about the residential park is it's 12 months a year. But generally that's what tends to happen. I mean, certainly all the parks on all the homes on my park are owner-owned.
You've touched on a very serious problem that's happening now in England, because when people decide to choose this way of life, they go and look at the park and say, yes, this will be nice for us, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's round about the same age, like-minded people, and you're choosing a lifestyle. And we have lots of park owners, once again, the rogues mostly in England, where the park owner owns a home, where he's bought it from a resident for practically nothing. At the present time in property, things weren't selling, so he maybe can't sell it, so he rents it. Now, what he does is he puts somebody in who the council have just probably thrown out of a council house somewhere. These are the type of people that he puts in. So suddenly, from you investing your life savings into a certain lifestyle, you suddenly got a family living next door to you that's been thrown out of maybe other four or five other properties, that type of situation. And it's becoming, it's an absolute disgrace. It's destroying people's lives. It's destroying what they actually bought into when they bought it. We don't believe that there should be a rent now, because the residents themselves can't rent the homes out under the Mobile Homes Act, or should the park owner. But he can, but that's it. It is a very, very serious problem at the moment, and one I wrote a paper on about 18 months ago to my colleagues, and I predicted that it would be the next serious problem in the industry, because it's, I get phone calls from people saying, we've moved on to this park, and suddenly there's a family next door, 4 kids up all night and shouting, and that's not what they bought into. They bought into a lifestyle among like-minded people. That's the attraction of moving onto these parks. So renting is going to be a serious problem.
The thing in particular also with this renting thing, a lot of the unscrupulous will rent them out because it's a bigger income. They're charging £100, £150 a week in their way to live in one of these mobile homes, where he's getting £150 a month for rent, or for the people that own their own homes. But the difference is that the park owners think that the rules and regulations for the renters doesn't apply. They don't come under the 1983 Mobile Homes Act because they're in a rented accommodation, and that is a different legal system than what it is for the residents of the mobile home industry and the mobile home owners. So there's a differential there. So that's why you get these families moving in with children, dogs and everything else. And the park rule says no one can live on here unless they're over the age of 55 or 50, whatever the park owner has laid down. And there's no children to live on the site, and you can't have any pets. And they move in families with young children, dogs, you name it. And the rules and regulations go out the window. So the poor souls that have bought into it, as David has just said, into that lifestyle, is now ruined. So that is a thing that needs serious addressing.
To a tribunal for a very similar case. The park owner rented to somebody with a dog, and the park rules had a strict no dogs policy. So he said, when I got through to him, he said, but this man doesn't have an agreement under the Mobile Homes Act. He said, I've only given him a rental agreement, so none of that applies. So I went to the tribunal, and I obviously argued that the rules had to apply to everybody. And of course, I over-egged it. I said, are you telling me that I have to obey the speed limit on the park? I said, and the guy who's renting doesn't. I said, are you telling me that I can't play loud music after so-and-so, and he can? And I went through all the things, and they said, yeah, we take your point at the end, but, it's ridiculous. The park, actually, we have a High Court ruling on it, that the park rules are for everybody, but park owners just ignore them.
So, Mr. Plews, how much of that is prevalent in Scotland? And my other question would be, are there some local authorities that are kind of an exemplar of how they should manage mobile homes in their local authority area?
To answer your last question first, it's very difficult for me often to get a real feeling of how local authorities are handling things. I do have a number of contacts that I can usually get some help from, but I think it's fair to say for most of them, these parks are something you deal with when you've done everything else. When you've sorted all out your other problems, then get to this. I mean, even where I live, unfortunately, the park I live on is an extremely good one. We very seldom see any visits from the local authority. They probably decide they don't have to anymore because nothing goes wrong. But I always feel that we should be seeing somebody wandering around and having a look and making sure and talking to people that things are still going well. And it doesn't seem to happen. I think it's something that's it's over there, and let's leave it over there until it causes a problem, to be honest.
It's different licensing as well. There's license different. The residential side, they appear to be that way. They work differently, council. I mean, we believe that they shouldn't have the mix on the park. You should have either rented or the other, and then it would be fair to everybody. You know, we're not against people living in rented accommodation, but at the same time, if you're going to have rules and regulations to protect everybody, then they should be for everybody, not split down the middle.
Okay, if we move on then to fit and proper person test, Mary, you've got some questions on that.
Thank you. Yes, we've touched on the issue of the fit and proper person test. And the test that will be introduced through the bill will apply to somebody who owns a site and also someone who runs a site on behalf of someone else. So what benefits will the introduction of this test bring to residents on parks?
Well, to start, I think it'll take away quite a lot of the criminal element, because they won't be allowed to be in the park. So, I mean, there are people who have criminal records who are running parks in Scotland at the moment. And their whole attitude is governed by the sort of people they are. And that's half the problem of why people are living on parks and having all of the issues that they tend to have. They're being cheated in many ways, or they're being frightened of parks so that they will leave their home behind and people can buy it from them cheaply and then sell it twice the price a week later. I mean, all those threats that generally come from people who have criminal records. And so that will clear them out to start with, hopefully, and get rid of them.
See, at the moment, you can, under the 1960 Act, anybody can apply for a licence and be granted. If you apply for a licence to run a taxi, you get background checks. If you apply for a licence to run an off-licence, you get background checks or anything. And yet you can run a park without any background checks whatsoever. And under this 1960 Act, even though the local authority knew that the licensee is a criminal, they couldn't do anything about it because it's not one of the reasons that they can refuse him on. They can only refuse him at the moment a licence if he has lost a licence or if prosecution has been brought against him twice in the last X number of years in that locality. So it's almost impossible to get anybody. So we for fit and proper person tests, we welcome them, don't we? Do. But we're not getting them in England. The government have decided to wait a bit, and if it doesn't work out, they've suggested some other things like heavier fines. And if it doesn't work out, the Secretary of State said he will revisit it and we will look at fit and proper person tests. But we're for them, and we believe Scotland should have one. As we believe England should have one, but we're not getting one.
I think
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. The only thing that I would look at under the fit and proper test, I mean, what you've put here, I think, is excellent. You know, there's a lot of, it covers everything. The only thing that I would say is that there appears to be, the way it's written in some areas, where the fit and proper person may not be the right person, so therefore we're bringing in somebody else. And it can all be out of the same family, but we're not stating the park owner as the main man of the thing. It says a person or an occupier, which is other legislation, the occupier word comes into play. But I believe that the park owner should be the man that is generally responsible for that park. He's the owner of the land. And we have to be careful that when this stuff comes in, that he doesn't turn up with somebody else because it says here a person that can be fit and proper. It does not have to be the owner. It could be his grandson or his grandmother. And these people work in this way where there are other people in the family that they can put into the position because they fit the words which is required. And I think it needs to be clarified to the degree that the park owner generally has got to be the responsible person. If he wants somebody to manage for him, then he must be responsible for that manager. And if things go wrong and there's charges to be brought about for criminality, then they both got to be charged because they're responsible. Words to that sort of thing has got to be in there to clarify. But basically, the whole thing that you've got here is well done. It covers a big area, but it's this main clarification of the main man at the top. As you mentioned in here, companies, and there's a bit that it says if the company is, where a licence holder is not a natural person, that the individual holds the most senior position within the management structure of the relevant partnership company or body is not or is no longer a fit and proper person in relation to the licence. But it doesn't say what happens to him.
So we the owner plus the person who's managing the site should both be fit and proper persons.
Exactly. You see, this is what we've said, because if we don't, we'll have a situation where your government has agreed to cover the fit and proper person system, but we've got someone that can move over and let someone else take position as a manager without being fit and proper.
One of the reasons it wasn't pursued in England was for that very reason, that the government argued it would be too easy to avoid. Put somebody else up, get round it.
But my understanding is that the bill here is proposing that both should be fit
Yes,
and
it
proper.
is, and we welcome it.
That's right, that's what we welcome.
We welcome it, yeah.
I think we've got to ensure
We just
that local
didn't get it in
authorities,
England.
the local authorities know that that is what's got to happen, because when you go on through it, there's various other bits of the Act that just talks about a person. And I think we've got to make sure that we've got this management bit right, and the top man is the man responsible all round.
Do you think the detail around the fit and proper person test is comprehensive enough to ensure that the person undergoing the test will meet the residents' needs, or do you think there should be something else in
Well,
there?
The criteria we went through.
We went through. Yeah, sorry. The only
The
other
criteria is okay.
The only other thing that we could say is that the only thing that I think does need to be looked at is that if somebody is not a fit and proper person, then that needs to be kept in a register of someone must have a register. And because that person could be not a fit and proper person in Aberdeenshire, but a fit and proper person if he bought a park in Stirlingshire, because there's a different local authority. He could go and have an interview and say, yeah, I'm okay, I've done this, that and the other, and he could get in. And you can have it where we've had it in England, and I know you've had it up here, where a park owner owns 10 parks, but there's all over the different, so it comes under different local authorities. And the local authority can, with the information they received about this man, can say he's fine. But another local authority will say he's not. So if that man has got a criminal record, it needs to be kept on file by somebody responsible for local authorities or some particular area where it can be going. So that if I came to a local authority in your country and I'd been criminal, you know, if I come, your local authority could ring or telephone or email or whatever this central body to say, has this man got any criminal record? Because you've only got his word for it. And I think it needs clarifying to do that. That would make this work perfect. So we had that extra bit of control, so they can't, because these rogues, believe me, they will do anything to achieve what they want, and lying is one of the greatest assets they have, and they're very good at it. So I think it's just a thing that we believe would improve it. But having said that, as I said earlier, I think what you've done there is good.
Mr. Plews, do you have any
No, I think
other comments?
I think it's been more than well covered. I do think that there should be relationships between local authorities to do additional checks, because these people are all over the country. There's no doubt about it, and that would be worthwhile. But other than that, I think it's covering everything.
So sharing of information across local authorities?
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing, from when we come to it, that the introduction of a licence fee should make the local authority more responsible in checking and policing these parks, because they will have been paid for it. So it might increase the behaviour of the local authorities.
And just finally, the British Homes and Holiday Parks Association has suggested that the bill should contain provisions which would allow ministers to make regulations on the fit and proper person at a later date if unscrupulous owners don't reform their practices. So what's your views on that? Because to have a fit and proper person test, there has to be some kind of regulation and then remedy. So what are your views on that particular aspect?
Yeah, go on, Dave.
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean, really.
Well, if
somebody applies for a licence,
uh-huh.
and they are subjected to the fit and proper person criteria.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying if they fail, what else is there?
If they apply for the fit and proper person test, then at a later date something happens and they're not complying with with the way they should be managing the site or the way they're dealing with the residents on the site?
There is another raft of enforcement procedures open to the local authority. There's, you know, there's this. We get to enforcement. You know, there's statutory improvement notices. They can serve that on the park owner. It's not very effective, but they can do it. The last resort is revocation of the licence, which we recommend the local authority should have the power to do. The management order, they can put their own management team in and run the park. So there's other, and there's a penalty notice, fixed penalty notice. There's many things that's open to the authority to do. Should he fail once he's even passed? You know, I understand what you mean.
And that would give them the right for further investigation, really.
Yeah.
That's the important factor.
No, they still have a raft of enforcement procedures to do.
And ultimately, I suppose it would give more security to the residents on the sites, and it would also mean there would be a uniform across sites across the country.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, as a typical example, as I said, we haven't got the fit and proper person in England, but we've got 2 or 3 of the nastiest people around that run parks, and we've got one now that, because he's been chased and he's been challenged by the local authority. He's been to court 3 or 4 times with the local authority, and he's also at this moment of time hiding from the local authority. He failed to turn up in court last week because his breach of site licence conditions he's up for, and he's claiming all sorts of things and handing it to his son, which comes down to what I said earlier about the wrong fit, and the son is as bad as him, but of course he's not the licence holder, and so it becomes involved. They hide and do these sort of things, and he's one of the crookedest men in the world, and they do anything to get away with it. He currently, it's now gone up. He owes £232,000 in fines that he's never paid. I mean, if that was me, I'd have been locked up by now. But it's the way the games they play, and he hides and runs away and whatever. Never get. So those things do apply. But you've got all the structure in here to deal with that. I'm sure you have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Right. Okay, if we move on to site licensing then. Jim.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, gentlemen. You've certainly brought to life the issues surrounding mobile homes, and particularly around the unscrupulous practices that exist, and maybe more prevalent, because I think one of the points Mr Tweddle made earlier was that you only know about the issues if they're brought to you, and so there could be a lot of activity under the radar that we're not aware of. But in terms of the site licensing and how that might help to address some of the issues, I note in the variety of written evidence that we've received that there are divergent views, and so both your organisations, the National Association of Park Homes, the Independent Park Home Advisory Group, appear to be against the suggestion that there should be a licence that would be renewed every 3 years, on the basis that that actually might strengthen the hand of the unscrupulous site owners. I just wondered if you could expand on that.
The problem we have with fixed-term licences is not as such, but it gives the park owner, don't forget we're dealing with day in and day out complaints all the time, it gives the park owner another weapon in which to threaten vulnerable people. It may seem strange to well-educated younger people that he can be threatened like this, but he will go around saying, I'm not applying for my licence when this comes up. I'm having too many problems with you people. I'm not even going to apply for it. And they think that after the end of 3 years they're out their homes, because he'll tell them that they're out their homes. It's all a lie, and we know it can't happen. We know, and you know, but they don't. So we're against handing him another threat which he can use against the residents.
I understand that point, but surely having the licensing system that is renewed every 3 to 5 years actually provides statutory weapon against the unscrupulous site owner.
I appreciate it, but we feel that the enforcement procedures that you have is adequate should a park owner be misbehaving and the local authority acts appropriately. There is enough enforcement situations that they can bring into force to get rid of him.
you're not...
without having to have a fixed licence.
I mean, we'll get the alternative view in a second, because I know that there's a range of views, but you're not concerned that you're actually handing in perpetuity a licence to someone who is, as you have eloquently outlined this morning, unscrupulous and criminal in their behaviour?
Well, we're not, if the council enforce properly. We're not handing him a licence in perpetuity. We're saying, you know, you've got your licence for an indefinite period, but should you misbehave, this is the range of enforcement criteria we can use against you, and if the local authority behave properly, well then they will police it. That's our view.
There is another piece on that, if I may, is the fact that on the front cover of the majority of people that live on parks, agreement between them and the park owner, on the front cover it says the licence holder's interest in the land will cease on, and unscrupulous put a date in there when they've done something that isn't right. This, having a 3 or 5 yearly licence, would increase that problem, because they would write on the front of there that their interest in the land would cease on a date when the licence runs out, and he would use that against the people. And we've got a similar situation in England at this minute of time, where a park owner has leased off 3 parts of his site to other persons. The park owner has the licence, but he's leased it to other people. So these other people have formed a little business where they make charges to the people for various things outside of the pitch fee review, because they're the new managers of that section, if you like. And they have altered people's license, agreements, or the park owner has, with the date his interest will cease. And there's people living on that park that feel that their agreement is going to run out in 6 years' time. And what do they do then? They were told, and we've had it with them before, they tell them that because their interest in the land has ceased, they'll have to go. Where can you take you home? Where will you go? That's another problem that comes in under that system of what you're saying. And this is why we believe as well, not just that, but what David has already said, that the licence itself should run in perpetuity. If the park owner fails to comply with the conditions of that licence, then he's prosecuted by the local authority. And you've got the fit and proper person that stops him going in there in the first place. If we get all that into play, the residents are more protected, and the law will work in favour, because the local authority under the new licensing scheme are going to be visiting the parks and inspecting anyway. They'll find out that there's problems on the park and they'll deal with it, we hope, which is far better than what we've ever had. So that's the reason why we're not so keen on the splitting up of the licence. I think it opens up another loophole for them, because you've got the facilities in this Act to go for the park owner whenever you wish. You don't have to wait for a fixed term to end.
If he's not behaving correctly, use the range of enforcement orders that the local authority have.
Right, so enforcement orders implemented by the local authority and the fit and proper person test, these are the routes to go down rather than a site licensing.
That's what we feel. Yeah, that's what we feel.
Okay, that's clear enough. Mr. Ploust, your organisation has a different
I certainly
view.
agree with that. I agree with the statements being made.
Okay, but I understood that apart from legislation, Action Group Scotland took a different view on site licensing.
Say that again?
I understood that your organisation, Park Home Legislation Action Group Scotland, took a different view on site licensing, that they were in favour of it.
I'm in favour of site licensing. I'm in favour of what's in place in this document.
So your organisation takes a different view from the view that's just been expressed by Mr.
I don't take a different view now. You're confusing me a little.
So maybe I'm confusing myself, but the two organisations that Mr. Tweddle and Mr. Doig represent are not in favour of site licensing. Is that correct?
We're not.
Fixed terms.
It's a licensing perpetuity.
Yep.
We want licensing in perpetuity.
Yep.
Our two
That's what we agree
organisations
to.
are not in favour of the suggestion.
Oh, I'm saying, sorry, I'm not being clear. The site licensing proposals in the bill, which are to have a 3-year renewal period, you're not in favour of?
My understanding has always been
One at a time.
that the licence applies to the land, that the land holds the licence, and so it's in perpetuity, in a sense. Then there's a licence to actually use it. So we're talking about two slightly different things, I think.
In terms of the Bill's proposal to have a 3-year period of a renewal of the licence every 3 years, your organisation is in favour of that, is that correct?
I believe that it should be checked every 3 years, yes.
So there is a difference of view between your organisation and the...
There is a difference,
Okay,
yes.
so can you explain to us why you're in favour of it?
I think it keeps, if you like, the owners on their toes. They've got to achieve certain things every 3 years. They've got to make sure they're achieving it on a 3-year basis. Give them any longer and they'll wait. I think anything that puts pressure on people to do the job properly is worthwhile. So, yes, I'm in favour of it being every 3 years.
I think, if I may add, Madam Convener, to that, to us the answer is not disagreeing with inspections on a regular basis. And I think if you wanted to have the parks inspected lawfully every 3 years, that's fine. But we don't let the licence run out. The licence can continue. And if the council wish to go along and visit that park every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years on an inspection basis, that's when they'll find the problems. Now, if you renew the licence, it must be a similar sort of thing, isn't it? But if the licence stays there in perpetuity, the council are going to be in a position to inspect when they wish, put notices on them when they wish, and it'll be controlled. There's no need for the licence to be renewed. We can have it the same. The only time it'll want renewing, if the things are so bad on there that you revoke it, then it'll need renewing when it's sorted out. That's a different bird.
But if we accept or we look on the principle that the licence is for the ground rather than for the right to use it, then yes, all we're doing is checking every 3 years that the person who is currently occupying that land is fulfilling his obligations.
Would the suggestion made by the British Homes and Holiday Parks Association that there be a proposed 3-year period, a change from the proposed 3-year period to a system whereby rolling licences are subject to a 5-yearly review, but with a legal presumption in favour of renewal of the licence, unless there had been problems within the 5-year period? Is that not coming close to what you're suggesting?
Yes. Yes, I think it is.
What about...
I mean, the excuse me, I've frog in my throat. Our issue is that we have regular inspections by the local authority. Now, how we achieve that, whether it's by having a 3-year licence or a 3-year renewal period or whatever, what we want is somebody from the council having to come at specific times and carry out some sort of examination that everything is okay. And that doesn't happen at the moment, which is why we're favouring the 3-year period.
I think, if I may just add one final thing on that, I think to have this
proposal that the British Homes and Holiday Parks Association have made, and whether that's something that would be acceptable to your organisation?
Well, it comes back to what we've said, but basically not what we've said, but they are asking, it appears to what you read out, that they're asking that we have this regular relicensing system, which is what we're not in favour of. And we're not the other reason we're not in favour of it is because it can't be good for the industry itself. Because also, you know, we published for people that are going to move on to parks, you know, look into things, check the licences in order, make sure the council have licensed this park, and how many homes should be on there, is the licence displayed on the notice board, etc., etc. All things are a sort of requirement. If someone goes to buy a home on a park and they see the licence runs out in 12 months' time, they're not going to buy a house because there's no one there to explain to them the reason why this is working the way it is. If the licence was stayed there all the time, it wouldn't affect that bit of industry work where it's going to... And also, it must hold back the people's right to sell their home, because they've got a right to sell their home to who they wish. And if there's no licence, they could say that they were wrong to sell a home that was a park that was unlicensed. So it needs to be there. There's various other things that need to be looked at, I think.
But surely there are sufficient safeguards everywhere else to make sure that the licence doesn't end. It just moves on. Either the council can take it on or whatever. It's not a case that an axe comes down and that's it, everybody off the park. It's basically a way of ensuring that the local council is carrying out its obligations to visit the park on a regular basis and make sure everything's in place.
Which is what I said earlier, we just need them to go and inspect the park on an annual basis. Don't have to alter the licence.
If you check our responses in the consultation document, you will see that we're in favour of inspections, which is just the licence that we worried about.
What we submitted.
Helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if we continue on the enforcement stuff, Mark, if you'd like to carry on.
Okay. Just ask if you're able to give an insight into how the current site licensing regime is working, if there are any issues, any problems with how the current enforcement regime is operating, and if there are any issues at local authority level with resources.
I think the problem that you've got up here at the moment is that the local authority don't really become involved. That's one of the biggest problems, is that they haven't got they haven't got into the parks. They don't go and visit them very often because they haven't had to. The way the acts have been written, they haven't got the time, they haven't got the money, they haven't got other things. That's what they tell us, to go and inspect the parks unless they get any complaint that there's a problem. So therefore, they can't enforce anything if they're not going round. This is why we've said if it had regular inspections, then the enforcement would work, because they'd be going on a regular basis, even if it was once every 2 years, or once every year, or once every 3 years, whatever. It'd be regularly inspected by the authority, and they could then enforce. Whether they find a problem, they can enforce it.
So do you think the issue with the current regime is lack of time and resources rather than lack of powers?
That is it's a bit of both, I think, because they haven't got.
I would say
That's
lack
a bit
of
of
resource.
both. Lack of resources.
All the powers are there, but they just don't seem to do it. I have a park over at Straighton now in Edinburgh, absolutely atrocious. The owner is a absolutely useless criminal. I've had him to court twice, to the sheriff's court. He's still got his licence. Nothing seems to happen. You know, he trundles along there. The roads are all absolute disgrace. He gets his electricity turned off because he doesn't pay his bills. The residents pay him for it, but he doesn't pay the utility company, and they're coming on the park saying that they're going to switch the electric off, and I get a phone call and I say, well, they can't switch your domestic customers, they can't turn your electric off, but of course he has a business agreement with the utility company, and they come on and they say yes they can, and until anybody else is involved, till it gets stopped. It's absolutely. So the local authority are not, in my view, don't pursue him. I don't know why. It's obviously they've got the powers there, which I've outlined. It must be, you can only think lack of interest or lack of resources. I don't know.
Sir, please.
We're just back at the same situation. The local authorities do not regularly visit parks to make sure everything's all right. And these parks are not some sort of multi-mechanised system. They're really quite simple. And I can't understand, I've never been able to understand why a local authority could spend half a day and know exactly what's going on in a park. That's all it requires. All they've got to do is talk to people, find out what's happening, tick the boxes and wander away. And that doesn't happen. And I can understand what's being said here, that we're trying to get some sort of enforcement of them, that they have to come at certain times. To me, it should be something they're doing on a regular basis, but they don't do it. If everything's quiet, they stay away. And the problem is everything's quiet because we have a community of elderly people who don't want to rock the boat. And this is why these things are happening in the first place. There are people like myself and like others who do rock the boat, and we rock it quite firmly. But majority of people at our sort of age, I'm 73, there are people, you know, on our parks 80, 85, 90. You want to talk about problems with them? I'd rather not. And they go away. Or they'll come down and knock on my door if we have anything, any silly little thing going on. On other parks, it's the same all the time. There are not enough residents of an age and even experience of what's happened out in life before they went onto these parks to do these things about it. And to me, anything that makes the local authority follow its obligations, I think they tend to forget that we are all council tax payers. We're not living there for free. We don't live there in their local authority for nothing. We actually pay to do it. And so this service, I think, should be done on a regular basis. And I can see and understand what's happening here. They should be coming in here. It wouldn't take more than a day. I could do it in half a day. If they come and talk to me, they could do it in a quarter of a day. And this is the problem. They're just not doing it. And there's got to be some way of enforcing that they do it. And if it says that they've got to come in and check the licence every 3 years, then so be it, or every 2 years. But something's got to be there to enforce local authorities to meet their obligations. We are all council taxpayers.
Mr. Twirrell, you'd raised a couple of points just on the impact that lack of enforcement is having on residents around disruptions to power supply, quality of roads. Are you able to pinpoint any other problems which impact directly on the residents because of lack of enforcement?
Yeah, just the site owner has a set of conditions. The conditions will relate to health and safety, roads, fire safety. From the Department of Environmental Health, they're the department that deal with it, and obviously those are the things that's very, very important on parks. But some park owners just breach the conditions. I get many, many calls constantly. If I could just condense it to try and get the message home. In all the years I've been doing this, there's two things that cause most of our complaints. Unscrupulous park owners and the lack of local authorities to do their job. And they're equally as bad to us as the unscrupulous park owners, because the local authorities cause as many problems by not enforcing and not inspecting. They cause as many problems to residents as do unscrupulous park owners. That's how serious it is. So it's important that local authorities get on board, and if they're going to charge a fee from now on, well then they'd better get themselves in gear. Because in England it's a disgrace. They don't bother.
I think it's a case that the local authorities could quite well need educating on the matter, yeah. Whatever. I mean, we would do anything to help if it was required. We do the best we can for anybody. As a further example, I mean, under the 68 Caravan Sites Act, the council are responsible for harassment and security of tenure, etc., which is in this act. And they don't do anything. You know, people, we say to them, go to the council. You're being harassed by the park owner in a bad way. Go to the council. They've got officers to deal with it. And 9 times out of 10, they turn them away. So it's not really our problem. We haven't got the resources to do this. But the Act says they should. So it's another problem.
We're going to have the COSLA, the Scottish Convention of Local Authorities, and people from Alacha, the housing officers, in to give evidence on this. So we will certainly quiz them on that.
Fine. That's great. It's great. Thank you.
Okay,
on the range of enforcement tools that the Scottish Government have proposed, do you have any views on whether that's wide enough to act as a deterrent to rogue operators, and are they proportionate? Would you suggest any additional enforcement tools for local authorities other than the ones that the Scottish Government have included in the bill?
No, I think we're quite happy with what they've got. I mean, you've got, if you can...
As long as they use them.
Yeah, as long as they use them and use heavier fines and that type of thing, because, you know, we've been for years where they've had nothing, or if they've been fined £500 or whatever. But if you strengthen on all of those things, I think it'd be fine. You know, you've got it right. It's criminal activity is jailable offences anyway, and you've got the criminal aspect in there, which would bring in other acts of Parliament that can be used against these people. So, yes, I think what you've got there would cover it.
I agree with all of that. This gives them all the ammunition they need. What they have to do is start using it.
On the issue of charges, are you content with the provisions in the bill that residents are protected from charges being levied against the operator and being passed on?
We don't agree with it being passed on, because I don't see why. We don't see why a resident living on a park that is paying a pitch fee or a rent to live on that land, why should they pay for the licence for a park owner to run his business? Because without the licence, you ain't got no business.
I agree with that, but are you content that the bill protects residents from those charges
Sorry, I misunderstood
being passed on?
Yeah, that's fine. I do think it does, yeah. That's what's got to be done. Sorry, I misunderstood you.
No problem.
For a moment.
Just to wrap up, just ask if you have any further comments on the proposed enforcement powers and how you think they'll benefit parks across Scotland.
Sorry, just going back to that, did you say that there's that the residents are protected from having the cost of the fee passed down to them?
The Scottish Government have the opinion that the polluter pays, so if the owner or operator is acting unscrupulously and they are fined, and that they pay the fee or the fine, and that residents are protected from any additional charges being passed on.
It's the enforcement laws, but
Yep.
the initial licence fee, we're against that the initial licence fee should be passed down to residents, because at the moment, the Mobile Homes Act, the pitch fee review in the Act, states that when reviewing the pitch fee, regard shall be had, and it gives a list of what the park owner and the resident can have regard to. And one of the things he can have regard to is any change or enactment since the last review date. Well, park owners will obviously claim that due to the enactment of the introduction of licence fees, he can then pass it down to and have regard to it at the pitch fee review and pass it to the residents, which he has in England, and they've got away with it. At the end of the day, in England, the residents have ended up somehow paying for the site licence. And at one meeting, one of the ministers said, "Oh, only the first. Only the first." I said, once it's in the pitch fee, it's in the pitch fee forever. And it attracts retail pricing increases all the way, year after year. So it's in forever. You are paying for his licence. Where we believe it's a business cost to him. We think it's a disgrace, but they seem to have got away with it in England. But we certainly don't agree with it. That this is what we said in the consultation. The agreement allows the owner to have regard to any increased costs which are the result of legislation or enactment at the pitch fee review. Park owners will claim that the introduction of a site licence fee is a new cost to the park and something they are entitled to have regard to at the pitch fee review, which will have the effect of residents paying the licence fee. A safeguard would have to be introduced in the pitch fee review procedure, similar to the safeguard regarding commission on the sale of the home, where the owner cannot have regard to the commission payment at the review. You would have to insert something to say that this can't be passed down. I don't know how, but that's what we said in England and we didn't get it.
Yeah, that was my misunderstanding when we were talking earlier. I mean, this should be the last thing we have to pay to actually support his licence to charge us money. There's something not quite kosher about that, I think.
The argument put forward in England by the government for this was that because we will have increased input with the local authority, the residents will have increased input, that therefore we should be in some way responsible for the licence fee. Of course, we don't accept that, but we never got it.
Okay, Gordon, would you like to go on?
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. Just to continue that point, I mean, let's assume that the site licensing is introduced and the legislation gives local authorities the ability to charge a fee, and it's been suggested that it could be around £600 for the 3-year licence. What are your views on the possibility of local authorities charging of a fee, and should the licence fee be a standard fee, or should it reflect or be varied according to the size of the park?
I think
Well, it would be unfair to very, very small parks if it's a standard fee. Brian's already touched on the fact that some parks are as small as 4 or 5 homes. £600 would be quite a hefty fee for somebody running a park with 4 or 5 homes. £600 would be nothing to a park with 200 homes on. So the standard fee, we believe, and I think we've adopted it in England, that it's going to be based on number of pitches. Number of pitches on the park.
Do you know what the level of fee is?
No,
on
they
average,
don't.
south
They're
of the
still
border?
talking about it, and it's up to the individual local authorities. They say some won't charge and some will charge different amounts.
It's under discussion at this moment in time. They've got a working party working on it. The charge and what the fee. There's a lot of suggestions flying about, but there's recommendations from various council officers, but they've not made a decision of what the fee will be.
In general terms, if the licensing was to come in, you'd be supportive of a fee being charged, especially if it was going to mean increased inspection of the sites through that funding.
Yeah, we don't disagree with that at all.
Yes, as long as it isn't the residents.
We think it should be a business expense for the owner,
Right, rather than passed on
rather
through
than
pitch
passed down
fees.
at the pitch fee review.
Yeah, I got that earlier on. And I just wanted to ask you finally about a comment that's been made by the British Home and Parks Association on the legislation in general that says that it could be unworkable red tape that could result in park owners being forced to sell their parks to the highest bidders. Are you concerned that the bill may force current owners of parks to sell? And if so, what impact might this have on residents if this legislation...
I think I'd like to start by saying I don't think I know of a poor park owner.
I think it's scare tactic.
It's a scare tactic that they're trying to use. Yeah, they're saying this a lot, that they're going to sell their parks, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. It won't happen, because if that was going to be a major charge, they're selling their parks, they're not talking about 50,000 anymore, we're talking about hundreds of thousands. And there's parks selling down our way for 2 and 3 million. So, you know, they're not going to, no one's going to buy it if it's that bad a proposition. You know, it's just not going to happen that way. I think it's just something to say, because if you start saying what you've said earlier, when you said you were talking about £600 fee, to somebody's park owners, a £600 fee is peanuts. I mean, you know, it's probably about 3 or 4 months' rent off one else. So I think it's a nonsense.
The costs from this reform and the reform of the implied terms aren't going to impact very much on them. In our opinion, that's just scare tactics.
They've not had any extra charges against them for years, these park owners, I've got to be honest. They all say that this goes up, that goes up. So does everybody else. And when you consider all these pensioners, they've just had an increase in England of some silly 2.5% on their pension, which gives them about £1.50 a week or something silly. You know,
Let us not forget
it's ridiculous.
Built-in RPI rise every year through the agreement.
That's automatic.
Everybody, they know it.
So as we said earlier, you know, things don't get done on the parks, the council don't enforce things, and etc., etc. So this bit of a cost for a licence to the park owner, I think, is minor.
Okay, thanks so much.
I agree with that entirely. The idea of passing it on to homeowners is a nonsense.
Okay, thanks.
We've talked a lot about rogue park owners, and Mr. Plews, you said that you lived on a site which had a good park owner. In between, there are a lot of park owners. On balance, are they, you know, good like yours, or are they trying to get away with as much as they can?
So that a lot of the problems, there's obviously a percentage. We'll just say 10% are criminals and will be doing everything they can to extort money. Then there is a big percentage in the middle, just through ignorance. The park owner doesn't know the rules either, and he goes around saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Yes, I can do it. And then they get through to us and I say, no, he can't do that. And, you know, but it's just ignorance. They're not criminals. They're not bad people. There is a group of those type of people. So if you're looking for percentages, it's, you know, and I was in a corner, I would say 10% are rogues and the rest are in the other group. And at the other end, of course, like Barry was saying, there's a good 10% of excellent park owners who run good, happy parks.
If I can add to that, when I first moved on to the park where I live, the park owner we had was Mr. Nasty. I mean, I didn't know anything about him, but I soon learnt. And he used to do everything in his power to upset people. He would go to people that were selling their homes and offer them peanuts for their home and frighten them to death that, you know, if they didn't sell it to him, he would get them removed and, you know, evicted, etc., because it wasn't up to standard, all sorts of things. He was a nasty person. But he came a cropper with another nasty person, if you like, that wanted to buy he was trying to sell a piece of land on the end of the park, and he did sell it. He did sell it to a builder, and this builder actually had to buy this bit of land with a mobile home on it. And he issued this lady, who was 82, he issued this lady with a notice to quit and get off the land, and she'd been living there for 20 odd years. And this was just an isolated little plot, so it was like, we couldn't call it a park because it was part of our park, but it was because it was isolated. She was out of the way, so she came to me and I went and saw her and I said, well, you just can't do this. And because I put in force what I knew legally, and to this builder, wrote to him through his solicitors, etc., he had to withdraw this from this poor old lady. And of course that created a war with our park owner because he'd sold it to him for £75,000, and this is absolutely true. And he then, because he had to run away from this builder, he sold the main park to the owner we've got now, who's a very nice guy like Barry. We've got no problems. He's a good guy, you know, no doubt about it. And so he bought the park, and this is 18 years ago. And he went up and saw this old lady and said, look, I'm going to do what I can for you. The builder still owns this piece of land. And she was paying the builder the rent, our park owner the electricity money, because the way it was all worked, it was all a bit of a mix-up. Anyway, he said, I'll do what I can for you, my dear. Well, our park owner got hold of this builder and he bought the land back off of him for 25,000. So he lost 50,000 quid in 2.5 years. So he's still chasing him now around the country. I know there's nasty's been had and all sorts, but our park owner said you can stay there forever, which she did. She passed away, and he's now built another home on there because she died when she was about 86. But it was a sad story. She was frightened out of her life of what this man was doing, and he sold the land from under her. And of course, she thought she'd had it, but fortunately, we saved her. But yes, I've got a very nice park owner. I've met a lot of very nice park owners, and I could take you to parks where they're absolutely magic, you know, and the way the people are treated is first class, and you can't knock that. But I've got a list at home of something in the region of 30 to 35 very bad park owners. Some have moved on, but they are very, very bad. So, yes, there's quite a lot, but there's, as I said, there's a lot of good ones, very good ones, and we praise them.
So apart from what's in the bill, is there anything further, is there any further action or any further additions that the Scottish Government needs to take to strengthen the protections enjoyed, that should be enjoyed by people on mobile home sites?
I think we covered it, David.
We went through this, didn't we?
Yeah.
Did we say we were happy with it?
Quite happy with
Yeah,
what's proposed?
we're more or less happy with what you've done. I mean, you're always going to be in a position to find something, but I think you might want to put into this a clause that you will review it in, say, 2 years' time or something to cover that this can bed in and see if it works. And if it's not working, instead of keeping going with an unworkable thing, then you'd be in a position to give a review and look at it further, say in 2-3 years' time or whatever. I think that would be a suggestion from us.
Any members got any further questions? Well, gentlemen, I thank you very much for that. That's been most helpful. And I now suspend the meeting for a short time to allow the panel members to switch over. But gentlemen, thank you very much. If there's anything else that you think when you get out of here, I should have said that, please put it in writing. But thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much for inviting us along.
Thank you.
you.
Okay, folks, if we can just continue our first item of business, and I now welcome the second panel on mobile home issues and the Housing Bill, this time from the Owners' Representative Group. So I welcome Colin Fraser, who's the Chair, and Jeanette Wilson, the Policy Director, Scotland, of the British Homes and Home Park Association. So, Adam, would you like to start the questioning again, please?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Can I ask, basically ask you to comment on the Bill's provisions as it relates to the Scottish Government's vision for housing in Scotland, and if I can just lay that out for you, that all people in Scotland live in high-quality, sustainable homes that they can afford and that meet their needs. Yes.
Yes. Well, we would agree with that statement exactly. And park homes, as they are nowadays, are very nice, very comfortable, and it's a sort of home that people want to live in. The difference from what was said earlier, it's not actually a growing industry. It grew in the last few years because people managed to find site licences that they were able to change holiday parks to residential parks. But most councils have in their local plan, they are totally against any more mobile home parks and the extension of any mobile home parks. That's the position at the moment.
Why do you think that is?
Because councils don't believe that mobile homes are as good as they are. They don't believe it's the sort of housing they want.
Jeanette, do you have any
Well,
comments?
they essentially don't recognise that it meets a gap for people. You know, there are people who want to live in a kind of, I hesitate to say gated community, that sounds very American, but, you know, they want the comfort of living with people who are similar ages. The majority of the parks are over 50, over 55 is a stipulation for the residency. So there are no children, you know, grandchildren, things can visit, but no children actually live there. And a lot of people actively pursue that kind of lifestyle. They feel comfortable, they don't have big responsibilities, you know, for maintenance or gardens or anything like that. And I think it's probably just a pretty historic view that they've held, to be honest. And many of them don't realise quite how well appointed the homes are nowadays. They're greatly improved on what they were, you know, 20, 30 years ago. And it's unfortunate that they don't recognise that that does meet a need for housing for particular people.
In terms of the Bill's provisions as it affects park homes, how would you characterise the Bill's provisions?
I think the majority of the Bill's provisions are very welcome, with the obvious caveats of the things we've commented on in our evidence that cause concern. But I think really there needs to be a kind of two-pronged sort of PR exercise, I suppose, really, where local authorities need to kind of take a common approach throughout Scotland to mobile home parks, to understand exactly what they are and what they're providing. But I think on the other side of the coin, it's obvious from a lot that's been said earlier this morning that there's a big education exercise for consumers too. You know, it's very worrying that so many of them don't appear to know their rights and just exactly where they stand when they buy a mobile home. There's lots of information given, you know, our members give out information to people when they're making a purchase, but I'm aware there are many parks that aren't in membership and that they probably don't do that. But even, for example, when the changes came in on the 1st of September with the implied terms and things, we encouraged the civil servants that we were dealing with here to put something together to alert consumers to exactly what the changes were and what protections they had and things. And although a little leaflet was done, there was a whole lot more that could and perhaps should have been said. So I think there's a big education exercise to do with consumers so that they don't find themselves in the unfortunate situation that some seem to do.
Add anything to that, Mr. Fraser?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. The only other question I have is with regards to the Scottish Government's consultation process for this bill. Were you happy with the consultation process? You obviously engaged in it, so do you have any comments on it?
Yes, the consultation process has been very good. The only thing that I would say is that the economic effects and things were not done very well, because they didn't look into what sort of effect things like not being able to get finance for a mobile home, things like that would have on a park owner, and lots of things they didn't look into, which could be the circumstances of what you've got in here.
Nothing else to add to that, really, no.
Thank you.
Okay. Folks, you sat in on the first session where the witnesses there said there were about 450 parks, they thought, covering about 4,000 to 5,000 people, yet in the policy memorandum for this bill, the consumer research by Consumer Focus identified 92 mobile sites in Scotland with around 3,314 mobile homes. What would be your assessment of the situation of how many home parks there are and how many residents it might cover?
I recognise these figures that you're speaking about just now, and we are not very sure how much there are, but what happens with local authorities on holiday parks, if you have a caravan or a mobile home for someone living in all the year round to look after the park, they have a licence for a residential caravan, and that is classed as a park. So you could get a total wrong number of, if you, like Barry applied to the local authorities, how many licences have you got? Because I have a wee park in Bucky, I've got a warden, I'd apply for a residential site licence for the one home. And that happens all over the country in most reasonable sized parks if somebody living on the park. So that's where you maybe get the 400 from.
So how many members, for example, do you have then in Scotland?
We have 52 members with residential parks, and that covers just under 2,000 residential pitches. I think previously, when the Scottish Government first got involved in park home reform processes quite a few years ago, I think somebody, Mark Bevan for the University of Stirling, did a research thing for the civil servants, identifying at that point the number of residential homes, but I'm not sure whether he based that on applications to local authorities, as Colin says, where, you know, people, holiday parks with one residential, one may have been listed. But I think that was probably about 2007 or thereabouts. I'm not aware of a complete study having been done since then.
We actually have 52 mobile home parks or licences within the BHNHBA. But of those, only 17 are exclusively mobile home parks. The rest are mixed parks, where you've got mobile homes and a holiday park.
Yes, I mean, I was getting that impression because what the gentleman from England was saying doesn't really represent what the situation is up here. We do get mixed parks, and we do get parks where there are rented homes as well as owned homes. So what would be the mix here?
Rented and home. Well, I personally have rented homes in my parks, mostly all rented. But the majority of parks don't really go in for renting. What has happened in the last few years is that homes haven't been selling very well. They buy back a home, they rent it out, and they will rent it out until such time as things really pick up. When they can sell a new one again, they'll stop renting it and slip on a new one, because that's far more profitable than renting something out. But that's why there's quite a number of rented ones. With a dotted around parks, there's very few totally rented parks.
Okay, so to what extent then would you agree with the Scottish Government that there is evidence that there are, and as we'd heard in the previous session, unscrupulous site owners who exploit vulnerable residents and fail to comply with their statutory obligations?
there are very few unscrupulous owners in Scotland. I have been Director of Scotland in the BHNHP for 25 years. I've been in the Park Homes Committee for as many years. And I know of all and most of the rogue park operators who they are in England. And they said there's 35 very bad park owners. I would say in Scotland there's only one really, the one that they were speaking about. It's not the best person in the world. The rest are doing okay, and some of them need a wee bit of educating, and we have been working on one in particular, and he is getting a lot better. But there's nothing like the rogues in Scotland that there are south of the border. They also said that the rogues will come up and buy in Scotland. They won't come up and buy in Scotland. The parks are far too small for them, the vast majority. All the bigger ones have been in the same families for 20, 30 years. I mean, there's 13 parks with over 50 pitches in Scotland in our membership. There's only 2 of them that haven't been over 20 years in the business. So I don't believe that the rogue element comes into it the same in Scotland, not in any way whatsoever as it does in England, because most of the rogues in England have multiple parks. They've got 20, 30, things like that, and larger parks. So I don't think we'll get them up here. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
But I think you would have to agree that not all are as brilliant as the one that Mr. Plews lived on, that there are certainly improvements that could be made on a lot of parks.
There's no doubt, like they said, a lot of people could be educated at what they should be doing more. People who've been in 20, 30 years are settled in their ways and the way, the way they do things. And also they might have a lot of older homes in the park, because with people with the right to sell on forever, you get homes that's really past their sell-by date still selling. So you cannot have a beautiful looking park like some of the ones that you see which have been newly developed that look great. You'll never ever get the older ones looking great, because the old homes pass on from person to person.
In your evidence, you stated that decent park owners with businesses where there are no wrongs to be righted are finding the burden of legislation difficult to manage. What current legislation is a burden?
The latest implied terms came out not recently. It didn't come out just in the best of ways. I mean, there's things like commission. Who pays a commission? It doesn't say. Who pays the commission? There's nothing in the legislation that says who pays the commission.
Sorry, what are you talking about when you say who pays the commission?
In implied terms. You asked what the problems are just now. The park owner doesn't really know who he's supposed to get the commission from. He has to decide for himself.
You mean when a home changes hands, whether it's the seller or the buyer, is that what you mean?
So really he can get the money from the seller or the buyer. One of the good things about it is it's got to be paid before the deal is completed. So one or other has to pay. But there's nothing in the legislation that says which one.
I think that the lack of clarity has caused confusion, and I think also the fact that the implied term changes in September, where the park owner role in the process of the sale so that they knew who was coming onto the park, was removed, and that's caused them a lot of concern, because the people, as we mentioned earlier on, people are moving onto a park because they're looking to live in a particular style of community, and they don't know who's coming onto the park now because the park owner hasn't met them, and can't sort of say yes, they fit the kind of criteria for how this community lives. And the park owners have been getting a lot of hassle from people who currently live on the parks because they're unhappy that they don't have the security of knowing that person is not exactly vetted, but, met with and assurances given that they are the sort of person that the person was expecting to live with on that community. So
and we're hearing from the first panel of witnesses that they have got no control because the park owner can sell the parks, the homes to whoever he wants.
the park owner would only sell to the people who are going to fit in. I mean, at the end of the day, park owners aren't looking for hassle. You know, they want a nice, cohesive community in the main. I mean, there's nobody sets out to make their business life difficult. So they're not going to encourage somebody to come along just to take their money for selling the home with no thought to the ramifications or potential ramifications afterwards.
But then what you're saying is that the park owner should have the last say on who a person sells their home to, and that could, you know, affect the price that
yes, I can see that
price that they might get.
Yes, sorry, you asked what the concerns were about the regulations. I'm not saying it's a massive thing, but it's something that's made them uncomfortable, and it's made the residents uncomfortable too. And that's an unintended consequence. I know exactly what the legislation was intended to do, to prevent bad people from stopping people selling their homes and trying to sneak in and buy them. I appreciate that. The difficulty has arisen because of the potential for upset on what was previously a very happy community, maybe not being so happy if somebody has sold their home second-hand to someone that wouldn't really have fitted in. And that I just was using that as an example of what you were saying, what are they finding difficult? And that has become a bit of a difficulty.
We also heard from the first panel about how local authorities are failing to understand their roles and responsibilities and duties in terms of standards on parks. Is that true, and are you finding through your organisation very different attitudes of local authorities in different areas?
Local authorities in the main haven't been near quite a lot of parks for a very long time, and in most cases that's for good reason. There's been no problem for them to come along to have to get involved in. The attitude throughout is not a level playing field in Scotland, I would say, and it comes back to the need, I think, for a sort of overall education exercise.
You will always find local authorities react if something goes wrong. If they get a letter of complaint about something, you'll get a visit from a local authority. The fact that they're not attending anywhere, they're not getting complaints. It's as simple as that.
Well, I would have to disagree with that, because often the people on the sites don't know who to complain to and don't know their rights in relation to the park that they own. As a constituency member, that's what I find, rather than that there are no complaints at all. It's just that the residents don't know the rights and don't know who to complain to.
Further highlights the need, as I mentioned earlier on, for a big PR exercise to consumers so that they do know. They ought to be in possession of the facts, particularly when you think of them handing over the money, the amount of money it is for a home. You know, you wouldn't dream of not knowing the details of it, or buying a car or something. You wouldn't hand over lots of money and not have all the bits and pieces that are necessary. I think it is a big gap to be filled there.
What I think the problem could be, there's so few mobile home parks in Scotland that a lot of councils have only got 2 or 3. And they don't want to get somebody geared up to look after 2 or 3 parks. And I don't know if there's someone in council that from a residential park you can actually go to discuss something about your caravan park.
Okay. Jim, do you want to carry on with
Yes, thank you, Convener.
licensing?
The issue of the duration of site licences. You say in your evidence that a 3-year renewal system would, and I quote, create uncertainty and destroy confidence in the sector. Now, given that the 3-year period is common to other licensing systems, and I'm thinking particularly of the homes in multiple occupancy, and there doesn't appear so far to be any evidence to suggest that this has destroyed confidence in that sector, what underpins your assertion?
On what?
You've made this statement in your evidence, which I've just quoted, that the move to a 3-year renewal system would create uncertainty and destroy confidence in the sector. Now, that's not happened with homes in multiple occupancy, where a similar system has been introduced. Why do you think this would happen in your sector?
Because it's a different thing altogether. A home in multiple occupancy, you've got one house. You've one house sitting there. One person owns it. The pot can move on tomorrow. They don't have a problem. Nobody's a problem. If you've got a caravan park, say the average caravan park's 35 pitches in Scotland, but say you've got 35 pitches, the people on the park will then
don't know what's going to happen. Just the same as the three fellows that were here before said. They don't feel secure having a 3-year licence. But as worse than that, Wales has decided on 5 yearly renewals of licence. It doesn't come until October. The finance companies, the banks, all the people who finance mobile homes and parks have withdrawn funding. They're not going to fund things that's got a finite time. A rolling licence or a licence perpetuity, which is the same thing, is what you need. The licence is, like they said before, for the land. It's not for the person, it's for the land that the homes are sitting on. And with a renewal, a review every 3 years or 5 years, we prefer 5 years. Not a renewal, a review.
You're concerned that it would put consumers off purchasing a mobile home?
They can't get funds to purchase, those who want funds to purchase. Banks and even lawyers and estate agents and things like that are putting people off buying them because, oh, you've only got 5 years. We don't know what's happening then.
I understand that. So you have suggested an alternative in your evidence, which is a rolling licence.
The licence is the same as a licence of the perpetuity. It goes on forever.
So, when you, the
other three boys said,
yeah,
the Park Association, and the people who represent the residents all do not want temporary licences.
So you would agree with the evidence that we heard previously this morning from the Independent Park Homes Advisory Group and the National Association of Park Homes that having a fixed licence period could be used as a weapon against mobile home residents? Is that a concern that you would share?
Definitely.
Can you tell us a bit more?
Well, if you do get rogue operators, they say, right, the licence finishes in such and such a date, I don't know what will happen then. That's all they say. But it's enough. It's too much.
You've said that you're concerned that having the 3-year licence period would put consumers off purchasing the homes, or rather that the banks and other financial institutions would be unwilling to lend to people if they were only had a 3-year licence period. Yep. Are there any other specific concerns that you have?
We don't need any more concerns. That's really bad enough. If you can't buy park homes and you can't get funding, there's nothing worse than that.
That's happening now without this. Are you saying that even the threat of this legislation is stopping it? Or is it like, you know, banks are not lending to housing associations? You know, they're not lending to a lot of organisations. It's not just because of this, or a lot of people. It's not just because of this legislation, proposed legislation. Banks
are not lending. They're being far more difficult lending to people, to park owners who want to buy a park. If you've got a park already and you can put it up for collateral, yes, you'll get it. But if you're buying a first time, they wouldn't be interested. But for park homes, very seldom you get a bank loan. Banks don't usually finance park homes. It's finance companies. There are only 2 finance companies, main finance companies, who finance park homes. And this is what they've decided in Wales. And the Welsh Government has already seen what's happening, and they are taking licensing for holiday homes. They are licensing it for perpetuity. They are not going to do 3-yearly licenses or whatever for holiday homes. They've decided, because of what's already happened with what they've done on the residential side, that that's not a good idea.
I'd still like to understand better justification for your proposal for rolling licences rather than having the proposal outlined in the legislation.
It would give more security to the consumers as well, to the people who are purchasing the homes. I mean, I think it's quite obvious that people would feel less secure putting their savings or whatever into buying a home if they couldn't be sure that that was it for however long as it is at the moment. It's just
Does your proposal have over just having the status quo where the site licences run in perpetuity? Or are you saying they would continue to run in perpetuity?
No, it would continue to run in perpetuity would be fine. It would give everybody the security they need. But at the end of the day, the Scottish Government's avowed intention is to protect consumers, isn't it? To give them more security. And really, if you make it a 3-yearly renewal system, that's having the opposite effect rather than making them feel secure. In addition, you've got the park owner constantly investing in the infrastructure of the park and improving things. I think the...
I'm not expert in this area, so that's why it's really helpful to have your expertise in front of the committee so that we can better understand the system and how it could operate. But I'm trying to understand the difference between what we have at the moment and what your proposal for rolling licences subject to a 5-yearly review.
Also, it was in response to what you said, because it was obvious from what was in the consultation document that that was the way you were going and thinking. So we presume from that you don't want the status quo to remain. So that was just a suggestion to say, OK, if that's the kind of direction of travel, how about this? Would be a bit more workable.
I mean, in our understanding, a rolling licence is the same as a perpetuity licence. It's just another word for it.
But we accept that, you want to be able to visit parks, make sure that they're checked on and things like that. So a review would allow that.
It wouldn't have the disadvantages that you think would come about as a result of the 3-yearly.
No, I think a 5-yearly review with a legal presumption that it's all is well unless there has been some incident in the intervening period gives everybody security, the park owner and the park homeowner.
Couldn't be used as a weapon in the way that it's been suggested for the 3-year renewal?
No, not if it's a 5-yearly review with a legal presumption that all is well unless there's been an incident of some sort. No, I don't believe it could.
If you had a licence in perpetuity or a rolling licence, then there would be no reason why you shouldn't have a 3-yearly review, because,
As long as it's a review rather than a renewal process, and I think as long as it's a legal presumption that all is well unless there's been some sort of infringement.
Okay. All right.
When you go to the licensing, you will recall, some of you, that many years, well, not that many years ago, pub licensing was for 3 years. And people forgot to renew it, they lost their licence for a while until the next meeting and all that sort of stuff. The Scottish Parliament, in their wisdom, gave them personal licences for the owner and the people in charge of the bar, and the pub licence in perpetuity, the licence goes on.
Okay. Right, Jim? You finished? Right, okay. Mary, do you want to go on to ask about the fit and proper person test?
Yes, thank you. It's just a couple of questions around the fit and proper person test. The bill will introduce a fit and proper person test, and it sets out the factors that local authorities should take into account when determining a fit and proper person. And your submission recommends something slightly different, that a standard procedure should be set up to establish a fit and proper status for applicants, so it can be used across all local authorities in Scotland to ensure consistency. So, could you maybe explain to me what differences you think there is in a standard procedure and the factors that local authorities are used to make that determination, and what benefit there would be?
The benefit would be that every park would be working under the same conditions, under the same criteria. Council, if you have different areas with different criteria for fit and proper person, that's not going to work. Because in one area you could be a fit and proper person, another area you couldn't. We would actually like to see some sort of application form that you filled in. This is the questions. This is whatever it is for everybody in every area of Scotland, given out by the Scottish Parliament or whoever does it. It's so simple, and it keeps things simple. Because again, councils have only 2 or 3 maybe parks in their area. None of them's got a lot of parks. And to set ourselves up to do something for 2 or 3 parks and review them every 3 years, this sort of stuff, it's a lot more simple to have something that's done nationally.
So you don't think that local authorities being given information around what factors they should take into account in determining it is a strong enough suggestion? You would like something more formalised?
I think there was a prescribed way of doing it across all of Scotland as well, it would have the benefit that where people have maybe more than one park and it's in different areas, then they would only be going through it once and then they would be, you know, on the register or however that would be. And I think it would be much more beneficial if that was one overall one for all areas in Scotland. Plus also, if somebody wasn't a fit and proper person in one place at the moment, there's, with the rogue operators we were talking about earlier on, you know, there's nothing to stop them popping up in another place where perhaps they don't think the fit and proper persons thing is going to identify them as not fit and proper.
So if an owner had sites in more than one local authority area, are you suggesting then that they only go through one application?
It would seem to make
where,
sense.
where would the application be? Who would deal with that application? Because at the moment it would be a local authority would determine that. So with your proposal, who would determine that application?
I would have thought the initial place where they were applying, you know, for their first application, and they would have to detail then other parks that they have interest in.
And would it then be the responsibility of the initial local authority to inform another local authority?
I would have thought a
enforced?
central kind of register that they would input it into, I would have thought would be the sensible approach.
I'm just not sure in practice how that would work.
Well,
Don't they have that tell us once system for the public doing things with local authorities where you go in and you register something and it shoots off in all sorts of different directions? I imagine something along those lines.
I mean, we would not be adverse to wherever the park is, that park in that area, if they've got a warding on it or something, they apply to the area that the park is in. The owner would just have one application for all these parks. But if it was wardens on the parks, they would apply at the area they were in. And that's all the more reason that they should all have the same questionnaire so that everybody is in the same footing.
Just not convinced it wouldn't overcomplicate it, but I accept.
I think it's far more simple than every council having a different one, and they will have.
And it would
And
be beneficial for each council to know, wouldn't it? I mean, if there's a central register and somebody pops up and is going to buy this park here, it'd be quite useful to tap in and say, oh, okay, he passed it in this area in this month.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to move on to something else in relation to the fit and proper person. Your submission also indicates that the likely success in achieving the goal of ridding the industry of rogue operators through the application of the test is unknown. And you also suggest that the government should adopt measures similar to those in England to allow ministers to make regulations regarding the fit and proper person test in due course. Now, the licensing regime is similar to other licensing regimes. So why is it so difficult in your industry to rid rogue operators?
I think the people who you would identify as rogue operators, I think the most delicate way to put it is they have very complex business arrangements. They tend to have... sorry, I couldn't think of a better way to put it than that. And that in itself... We've heard of this before, you know, where there's a kind of smoke and mirrors situation. It's one person, oh, it's their cousin, it's their nephew, it's their son. It's very difficult, I would have thought. And those who don't abide by things currently, we just have concerns that, you know, that's their mode of operation, isn't it? What's going to make them suddenly do everything in an upfront, appropriate manner now? I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't try. Of course we should. You know, I've discussed this with the civil servants previously, and their view was if it caught out a few, if it rumbled a few out, then that was good enough, you know. So I'm not saying we ought not to be trying to do that. It's just a concern about the complexity of those business arrangements that would come to the fore undoubtedly.
We also have a concern where when people are first applied to be made a fit and proper person, and maybe even a long-serving, there's only usually one person in a mobile home park because of their size. A long-serving person is found not to be fit and proper. What do you do with them? You can't sack him? You can't make him redundant? What do you do?
So what do you suggest we do?
I don't know. I don't want fine.
Would you then, if someone was assessed and found not to be a fit and proper person, should there then be some criteria or steps that they go through to allow them to become a fit and proper person?
Yes, it would depend on why they were deemed not fit and proper. I mean, if it was because they had a criminal record that you didn't know about, you couldn't really scrub the record, you know.
With some past time, part where I doesn't know about.
Okay. So, solution?
That's what they're asking you.
Yeah. No, I'm keen to hear your thoughts and how we would resolve the
Employment
situation.
law is very difficult. You certainly cannot pay someone off or sack someone because they're found to be not fit and proper. You cannot make them redundant because they're not fit and proper. You're up for unfair dismissal.
I think it's a very complex area that we just, when we were thinking about how this would work. You know.
We've tried to get advice on it and they all say, well, nothing you can do.
But you do support the fit and proper person?
If the criteria is right and get answers to all the questions.
And a consistent approach throughout Scotland we feel is very important.
So if the criteria were right and it was consistently applied, you would be able to deal with someone, either someone not being.
We don't know in employment law terms how we would be able to overcome that, to be honest. We have asked...
I mean, if there's something in there, it allows you to sack that person or to make them redundant, fine. But I can't see how that possibly can come about.
You've raised something that we hadn't previously pondered.
If you knew the criteria, you could presumably make sure that the person could be trained or to meet the criteria. And if the person had a criminal record, well, that's in underemployment law. You could deal with that.
I mean, if it is a case of the need some sort of training or there's some sort of programme they should go through, and there is a clear criteria laid down within employment law and regulations, if they didn't meet those standards and they were in breach of what you expected of them, and they knew what the expected standards were, then you would be able to dismiss them.
It's just a complexity that we hadn't considered until we got to the stage of putting this together.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Mark, you want to ask some questions about enforcement?
Yep, thanks, Convener. Just to ask if you're able to describe how the existing powers regarding enforcement and how they've been applied have impacted on residents and site owners.
Well, under the 1960 Act, and you're reading the paper, it's the 1960 Act, they've always had the powers to take action if a park owner is not complying with the pitch fees, with the site licence. They've always had powers to move into the park and do the repairs themselves. They've always had powers to take the park owner to court. They've always had powers to withdraw someone's licence. They've got all that powers and always have had all that powers at present.
The Scottish Government feels that given local authorities that range of robust enforcement tools is really crucial to making sure that sites are managed well. What are your views in general on the new range of tools that have been proposed? Are they wide enough to tackle those rogue site operators and act as a deterrent, and do you think they are proportionate in their impact on site owners at present?
What's been proposed is all to do with the park owner and the people who work for him. It's nothing to do with a site licence. Site licence at the moment is all to do with the structure of the park. I mean, a site licence is site boundaries, spacing, hard standing for caravans, carriageways and footpaths, drainage, water supply, sanitation, litter and refuse disposal, fire precautions, which has now been taken over by the Fire Authority, lighting, storage space, recreation open space. The site licence is entirely different. We're looking at the person who holds a site licence, one area looking at the site licence. Most people comply with their site licence. Everything that you've got there, and most people comply with their site licence because they have to keep somebody with electricity and somebody with drainage and somebody with water. So what we're really looking at is the person who's going to have the site licence rather than the site licence.
I think the new range of powers is proportionate. Just think that will have a negative impact on those operators who are exemplars, who are doing a good job.
Well, they won't end up in a situation of being in court or, you know, infringing their licences or anything like that. The vast majority of park owners are very astute, you know, sensible business people. They're not going to end up in that situation.
So you have no issues with the new enforcement powers being brought in?
Well, I think the issue of the interim manager is of concern because it's not clear just at the minute exactly what powers they'll have. For example, you know, will they be able to undertake sales? You know, if they do that, what will happen regarding the bills for the utilities, etc.? Because there's a part in there where it says that the individuals on the park won't have to pay their pitch fees and they won't have to pay for the electricity and things if various things have happened. And I think we detailed in the evidence our concerns about that, because if the park owner isn't receiving any income because the people don't have to pay, how will he pay for the utilities? You know, you don't want to get into a situation where the utilities are cut off because the money hasn't been paid. So there's a whole lot of detail and clarity needed behind how that would actually work, for example, with an interim manager. If the interim manager can't do sales on a park, although slightly questionable who would want to come along and buy a home if at that point in time it's an interim manager from the council or whoever. But, you know, if they can't do that, there's no revenue coming in. What about the maintenance, the day-to-day maintenance on the park, all those things? At the moment, it's not clear how that would all work. So that is a concern. Also
on improvement notices, if a park owner doesn't comply with an improvement notice, he, within 28 days or whatever many days they set up, the local authority has to let the people in the park know, and they are supposed to withdraw the pitch fees, the electric money, the gas money, all the payments they pay to the park owner. He gets no profit from sales, commission, anything. That is even before, if the local authority or the people know as soon as the improvement notice has been breached. That is before any appeal has been made or anything. So how can a local authority take away someone's income from them before there's an appeal, before there's a court case or anything? How can a park owner run the park? It's not under management at that time. How can a park owner run the park with no funding?
Okay, I mean, I did note the points that you'd made in your evidence. But sort of carry that on to further points that you make in your evidence on the polluter pays principle. How do you feel about the proposals where the bill would prevent rogue operators passing on any charges that they incur onto residents, and how that possibly balances with the example you give in your evidence of where it's possibly a resident who's caused the problem in the first place? Just wonder if you have any comments on that.
If a park owner is doing things wrong and the local authority is writing to them and charging them funds and all this sort of stuff, as far as we're concerned, the resident shouldn't pay. Simple as that. It's a park owner who's due the money.
Just a final question on enforcement, just if you have any other general comments to make about the detail of the proposed enforcement powers, and if you think that there are any further adverse impacts that there could be on site owners that we haven't touched on so far?
Well, one of the main things is fines, £50,000. If you don't carry out an improvement notice, you can be fined up to £50,000. Again, in Wales, it's £500. But what we worry about £50,000, we're told this is what the Scottish Government has set £50,000 for all sorts of things. We don't believe just because it's set for all sorts of things, it should be set for that. Because when you go to a court, the judge will say, oh, £50,000. Oh, well, if I give him 25% of that, that's 12,500. And you're going to get really big fines. But because you've got such a high top fine, I don't think anyone will be fined the top fine. And that's, we don't believe just because the Scottish Parliament has a set figure of 50,000 for certain things, it should be 50,000 there.
Right, thanks. Gordon.
Okay, thanks very much, Convener. What's your view regarding the proposal that local authorities can introduce a site licence fee of around, it's been suggested, around £600 for a 3-year licence? And should the licence fee be a standard fee for all parks, or should it vary according to the size of the park?
Well, definitely got to be for the size of the park. I did a wee bit of research last night, and our smallest parks, there's one with 5 pitches, one with 6, one with 7, 2 with 10, 1 with 12, 1 with 19, 3 with 20, 1 with 21, 1 with 22, 2 with 25, and 1 with 28, and 3 with 30. You've got the 33% of the membership of BH and HPA parks with less than 30 pitches. £600 is a lot of money to a wee small business like that. So it must be per pitch.
By per pitch. And have you any suggestion of what that level of fee should be per pitch?
That's nothing.
I think we all live in a world where we wish our bills were nothing. Yeah. The first panel suggested that fees should be considered a business expense. What's your opinion on this, and should park owners be able to recoup the cost through pitch fees?
Park owners have very little way of increasing their pitch fees. It only goes up with inflation every year, whatever inflation is. So if there's extraordinary things come in, like licensing, it could be licensing just now, it could be something else that's far more expensive after. These should be passed on to the residents. Even if you have 30 pitches, again, 30 pitches shouldn't be £600. So it's not going to be a lot of money, and if it's not a lot of money, if it goes with the pitch, smaller parks I wouldn't expect would pass it on, because it would be minimal.
And most of the other questions I was going to ask have been covered in previous questions, but what I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned earlier the situation in Wales regarding possibility that banks and finance companies are not willing to finance the purchase of parks and park homes as a result of the 5-year renewal of licence. Can you point us to any specific examples of where we can obtain more formal evidence on that?
Just be from parks, that's where we got it. We got it for BH and HPA. Well, you could write to, I don't know the name of the...
Is it Darren Mither, do you mean? Darren Mither? Oh no, he's the holiday parks.
No, the finance companies.
Mm-hmm. Shall I try to get it from BH&HPA head office, because they may have something more substantial that I could...
If you can get some form of briefing and send it on, I think that would be helpful.
Well, we'll get something, we might be able to get something for the finance companies. But they're all companies that loan money at the moment are looking really much into everything, and if there's a least little thing, no. And that's what's happened.
It's perhaps pertinent to add as well that one of the members who has a residential park over in Fife approached one of the big estate agents stroke lawyers over there, just to see really how knowledgeable they were about park homes, and if they had someone coming off the street wanted to buy one, you know, how well placed they would be to advise them. And worryingly, for a company that has branches all over Scotland, they said they would just show them the door and say, no, don't do it, which we didn't really feel was particularly positive.
Could I bring up the renewal of a site licence? On the renewal of a site licence, when a park owner is selling a park home, a site, the purchaser, there's always something in the sale that the purchaser must get agreement to get the transfer of the site licence. This paper says the local authority can have up to 12 months to decide on a site licence, whether they want to give one or not, which is absolutely ridiculous. On a sale, it should be more or less automatic, because if local authorities are doing their job properly, all sites out there should be ready for transfer. Simple as that. If they're looking at sites, keeping them up to date, seeing that they're all up to scratch, the transfer should just be more or less be automatic. I know in Scotland, planning get 8 weeks to pass massive plans for office blocks and everything. Surely a local authority can do a wee thing like a site licence in 8 weeks, the same as a planning. We also come when someone dies, transfer of licence. If it get a whole year again or whatever, as soon as that person dies, that park, if it's in his name, that park doesn't have a licence. Now, the last thing that someone who's just lost their husband say is going to think about, oh, I need to renew my licence. It'll be months down the line before you think about transferring the licence. The 1960 Act, in its wisdom, and there's a lot of good things in the 1960 Act, says they immediately become the owner of the licence, and then they have to apply to get endorsed by the local authority. I can't see any other way where someone dies and has to get a transfer of licence. You cannot go through all the procedure, because you're not going to have a licence in between. So there's got to be something in the legislation that they still have the licence in between, or it goes automatic. And the wording is in that paper we did. It's in the 1960 Act, which allows that to happen automatically, and then you get a licence endorsed.
And how would that fit in, you know, if you reduce the timescale that's being proposed down to, say, 8 weeks, as you're talking about in planning, would that give enough time for a fit and proper person check to be carried out? You know, because obviously you want to ensure that the park is being sold to somebody. I mean, we heard about the rogue owners down south. I mean, would that give the authorities the opportunity to check fully into somebody's background if you reduce that period of time to 8 weeks?
Well, if they've got the proper form, it goes to all different councils, the same form that you fill up. It'll ask questions, and that'll be the answer. They'll only need to be looked into if there's something there that they need to look into. Otherwise, if everything's answered yes, 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 or whatever you do it, there shouldn't be a problem. But I do know, and you're speaking about houses of multiple occupation and landlords and registration, some councils are months behind. We can't have that with a fit and proper person who's got to be somebody who's coming to work for you. We can't have that. We've got the same problem there. If I have, I had one park where I went through 4 managers, well, I call them wardens, in 1 year. Just unfortunately, 3 of them weren't any good. They might all have been fit and proper, I don't know. But when someone leaves, they often fall out with the park owner or something. They leave and they go. You need someone quick. You cannot wait for weeks and weeks and weeks to get someone as a fit and proper person, because you can't employ them until you get this back for the council. So there should be something laid down in the legislation, how long the council actually has got under normal circumstances where there are no inquiries to do a fit and proper person procedure.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right. And finally, you said in your submission that close attention needs to be given to transitional and commencement arrangements of the bill. I mean, I take you were consulted in terms of the bill's provisions at the outset. You know, can you expand on what you mean by that?
Well, the site licensing, there's a lot of things to be filled in here, and we don't know what they are. And that's what we're speaking about. So until we know what they are, we can't really answer your question.
But you will be consulted on what goes into what we call subordinate legislation in relation to the bill.
I think one of the points also that we were making is that if existing licence holders have to reapply for new licences within 24 months of the legislation coming in, we were concerned as to why, if there's been no problem whatsoever on that park, you know, for as long as the local authority records go back, then why really is it necessary for the administrative burden of reapplying for their licence? I can understand it entirely if there's been an infringement along the way, but it just seems an admin burden for no real reason. If there's been no problem whatsoever, why would they have to reapply for their licence within 24 months?
To go back to Adam's initial question, if you want to improve the standards of homes that people live in, you know, which is what this bill is trying to achieve, you know, what the burdens under which the licence was initially given might be far less than you want to ensure that the whole park is of a better standard now than it was when the licence was initially given. So that's why you would want to surely ensure that, you know, standards were improved and improving all the time.
But would that not fall quite automatically if there was a review situation every 5 years for a licence and if there were regular local authority visits? You know, it just seems it's, apart from anything else, the workload on councils within 24 months for all the parks to apply for a new licence is probably quite substantial if they haven't been to the parks for many years. So we just kind of thought it would be probably better placed having the not an inspection, a visit or whatever, and discussing changes and negotiating the site licence changes from there rather than en masse saying everybody in Scotland has to do it within 24 months. I think obviously the priority would need to be the ones who've had problems.
I am actually aware that the Highland Council are reviewing their site licences at the moment, and a lot of other areas are also looking at their site licences because it suddenly dawned on them that they have nothing to do with fire precautions and all this stuff now. So that has to come out of the licence. I know at Highland Council will be introducing their new licences imminently, and for them to put out new licences now and have someone have to redo them again in 2 years doesn't seem very good to me.
Okay. Anyone got any further questions? All right. Thank you very much for the evidence you've given today. That's been most helpful. If there's anything else that you think you should have said and haven't, please put it in written evidence. But again, thank you very much. And I'll briefly suspend the meeting to allow the witnesses to leave the room.
Thank you very much for the invitation here today. It's been very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move swiftly on. Agenda item 2 is the legislative consent memorandum. This is consideration of an LCM on the High Speed Rail London West Midlands Bill, which is UK Parliament legislation. Because the High Speed Rail London West Midlands Bill alters the executive competence of Scottish ministers, legislative consent is required. In paper 3, it includes the LCM and provides details of the LCM procedure. The committee is invited to consider whether 2. Report that the committee is content with the LCM and with the Scottish Government's view that it is in the best interests of the Scottish people and good governance that the relevant provisions of the bill should be considered by the UK Parliament, or report that the committee notes the LCM. So, anybody got any comments? So what do we normally... So, if we go for the first one, report that the committee is content with the LCM, is that agreed? Yeah. That is agreed. That's fine. I remind members that next week the committee will be meeting on Monday, the 24th of February, in the Borough Hall, Dumbarton, as part of Parliament Day, and that meeting will be from 6 to 8. But then we've got events and taking evidence and going out and seeing folk during the day. But if members have got any questions about that, the clerks will be pleased to answer them. And I close the meeting. Thank you very much.